Thank you. I would now like to call the Longmont Housing Authority Board of Commissioners regular meeting to order. This is Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Can we have a roll call, please? You want to start with?
Commissioner McCoy, present.
Commissioner Chris, present.
Chair Peck, present.
Commissioner Yarborough.
Commissioner Hidalgo Ferry.
Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director.
Tim Hall, Assistant City Attorney.
Kendra Daniels, Accounting Supervisor.
Quincy Williams, Regional Property Manager.
Sarah, Public Safety. Lauren Sally, Assistant Director.
Okay, we're all here. We need to close it up. Is that right?
No, it's not an
Okay.
executive session.
Unless you want to close there. I mean, what you got going on, what you thinking about?
Okay, we now need to approve the minutes for November. See, I
I move the minutes as presented.
the November 19th, 2024 minutes.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner McCoy, seconded by Commissioner Yarborough. Do we have a vote? All those in favor of passing the motion?
Aye.
Say aye. All those opposed? That passes unanimously with that passes. Oh yeah, that passes 5-0 with Commissioner Rodriguez absent. I want to say 6, but what she said. We are now at public invited to be heard. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Seeing nobody in the public that would like to speak, we're going to go directly to old and new business. I'm going to turn it over to Molly Donahue. The first thing on this agenda is to designate the 2025 official posting location for LHAAB board meeting in January.
Okay, so last year, the official posting location was the Agenda Management Portal, the LHA website, and the west side entrance of the Civic Center. So I think we would just need a motion if you want to stick with that for 2025.
Can I get a motion? And then we'll discuss it.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Yarborough, seconded by Commissioner McCoy. Is there any discussion? Do we want to keep it in the same locations? Does that work for everyone? Does anybody want to move the locations?
Have we had any response?
No, and it matches the city's posting locations, so we've stuck with that, and we haven't had any requests to post elsewhere.
Okay, so all those in favor of leaving the posting locations as is, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes 6-0. With council, it's going to pass 5-0 with Commissioner Rodriguez absent. The next thing on our agenda is the 2024 bad debt write-off annual report. Turn that over to Kendra.
Yeah. So this year, we had about $78,000 that we wrote off. Of that, close to, 69,000 of that was sent to collections. We had about 3,000 that was written off because tenants passed away, and we just don't send those anywhere. And then we wrote off about 5,300, which was basically tenants that were really below the threshold that we didn't feel that collections was worth the effort. And that was the ones that were written off, that included about 12 people. So 26 total individuals were written off below the threshold. We do have 4 that were sent to collections, and they were over. Harold's allowed $5,000, so he can write off $5,000, but we had 4. That's the little orange table down below. One was a HCV tenant. They were on a repayment plan. They did not provide payments back, and they lost their voucher. And so it's about $10,000, and we sent that over to collections. And I think Tracy's reported it on her side to EIB, so that HUD is aware as well. Spring Creek, we had one resident that had about a $13,000 balance, and that was due to damages in the unit. It wasn't a meth unit, but there were damages, and this was one that actually went to court, and we ended up winning, so those legal costs went back to the tenant. Then we had 2 meth units at the suites that were turned over for collection. But what we need to get from council is the okay to write off those balances. Basically, those balances are with collections now, and they have up till 6 years to investigate and try to find these individuals. What we found is that these individuals usually can't be found. Out of the probably 690,000 that we've sent over to collections, they've only found 1 individual. So collections doesn't look good on our side, but we still actively pursue that if we can. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Do you keep information, Kendra, about the individuals that you're writing off? So if anyone requests, asks for a reference or something, you can say there was a write-off with that individual.
Yeah, so technically what we were finding is they weren't putting the items on the ledgers. So then tenants could come back and there was no reference of anything ever being written off. So yes, if you pull up that tenant or if they try to apply, it's going to show them in our system, and you'll be able to see that, yes, they were sent to collections, they had a balance, we never were paid, so there is that backup documentation now.
Okay, great.
As far as the repayment, how long does it usually take HUD to get them in the system to where, because my fear is them going out and then porting back in with a different family member or something like that, or, before I know their voucher is taken with us, but it's gone, but if HUD doesn't have that information and with all the things that's going on, how long does it really take for them to say, oh, this person cannot apply for Section 8 or, anything like that?
I think actually Tracy submits to EIB on a monthly basis. So she should be submitting that cost, and EIB is something that downloads from Yardi, and then she uploads it into EIB. And then there's a spot where she can let them know that they owe a balance. And so it should be immediate because they've monitored that EIB system against HUD's vouchers pretty good. In fact, they'll even let us know when our system kind of differs from EIB.
So with the repayment plan, I'm sorry to keep going on with this, I'm just trying to figure out how can we prevent this? $10,000, this is not damage, it's not a meth unit, that's a lie for someone for income verification that, fraudly,
It is a lot.
you know what I'm saying? So, is there anything that you all have talked about? How can we prevent this happening again with the repayment plan? Once we find out this person income verification was false, and I know we want to keep them housed, that's very, very important, we want to keep them housed, but what can we prevent from them, this happening again? Because like I said, $10,000, that's a lot of money that they owe, and it's not damaging the property, it's money that they actually owe because they were living rent-free, not paying that money. So what can we do to prevent that?
So I would have to talk to Tracy on her side. So, technically you only do a recertification on an annual basis.
Right.
And that's usually when you go back out to EIB to see if there's any anomalies. That's when you get bank statements again that'll show the anomalies. I do know they were not actively using EIB before the city came on board and before Tracy became involved. So a lot of fraud payments and repayment plans weren't being And so now that we're practicing using that system to know what income people have and validating on their bank statements, because sometimes it doesn't catch in the EIB if you're getting payments through Venmo or those cash apps. And so then the HCD specialists have to question and say, hey, what is this money? And if they can't provide the documentation, they have to count it as income. So I think there are thresholds, but within a year, anybody could be defrauding and have 10,000 easily if they're not actually coming in and telling us that they have new income. I mean, they come in definitely if they lose it, but you see it more rarely if they get more.
I would also say this is more of an anomaly than the norm. We do find fraud rather frequently. It's usually small dollar values, and we do a repayment plan, and it often gets caught up. So this is more that we do find. Sometimes it's fraud, and sometimes it's only part of their income that we're looking at. Sometimes it is a bigger deal, not as often, certainly.
But we do have to start taking into account of like Venmo and Cash App and all those things as well.
We have definitely looked. So I want to introduce Quincy because he's going to play into this. So Quincy Williams is our new regional property manager, and I'll let him introduce himself. But just to note, he comes with a ton of experience and a ton of what we want to do in 2025 is really get some of these policies, procedures, stuff, standard operating stuff written down and memorialized so everybody's working off the same page. So if you don't mind for a moment, if we could introduce Quincy, we could do it later, but it makes sense.
Let's start John.
So yeah, I took the position 4 weeks ago. I'm very excited to be working with Longmont. And to back off of your question or your statement questions that you're asking, cash apps and Venmos are always taken into account. Most of the time they don't get brought into play because that's not the main focus of the income where it's coming from, but it always does. So typically, if you are to find fraud in a resident who's doing something like that, it's found pretty quickly. The recertifications are done yearly. If your income does change in the middle of the year, we do annuals in the middle of the year, IRs, annual research. So as far as this resident here who has $10,000 of money that isn't paid, I know that it can be found a lot quicker than letting it drag out. So just paying attention to it, making sure all the properties are up to par, which we're doing now. I know there are a couple properties now that we're trying to get cleaned up, which we really have plans to get the research back on track so we can get those subsidy funding.
Well, I would also say with this particular one, and most of them know that they are going to lose their voucher. If they don't abide by the repayment plan, they're going to eventually lose their voucher. So a lot of them do actually make their monthly payments or come back in and let us know if they're struggling and if they need to work out a monthly payment. But this one was obviously making a lot of money and didn't care if they lost their voucher and decided not to repay.
And Longmont is special as well because you venture out to other property management groups, which I've said millions of times already within the last couple of weeks. You don't get as much leeway that you get with Longmont outside at other entities. You get caught, there is no such thing as a repayment plan. Once you get caught, you're done, your voucher's gone forever. So for us to be able to extend that hand is something in itself. So we'll pay attention to that.
Yeah, I was just wondering how can we prevent, I know this is not typical, but 10,000 is a lot of money. And so for me, it would be nice when someone is on a repayment plan for this amount of money that we do 3 months, come back and let's recertify or look back into it and see where they are, what they're doing, if they're paying on time. I don't know if that has to be the HUD or a policy with us or what. But I think when it's a certain amount of money, I think we need to revisit that every 3 months when it's that amount of, that large lump sum. When it's, $700, that's different, or $1,000, that's different.
Yeah, and accounting does this on a monthly basis. Heather sends it over to Tracy to let her know who's paying and who's not paying, and Tracy takes it from there to notify the tenants and give them a demand, and if they can't, if they sometimes, and the problem is that it's kind of a never vicious cycle, right? You go a repayment plan, and then they have to do another demand, and then they have to have the opportunity to come in and dispute it, and
Right.
so you have this this cycle that you always have to go through first.
Yeah.
So it does. They do get it on a monthly basis, and we're starting to have to make calls, and we may have to make tougher calls, like Quincy was mentioning, because we are in a HABs shortfall right now, and we may just have, if they're not repaying, that may have to be the first piece that gets those vouchers that get taken away.
Shoot, right here. Okay, how long have we been in the practice of offering a repayment plan?
We've been doing this, we've had it in place since we came in. I don't know if we had all of the financial data organized to know exactly who and what and how much for at least while we were getting all the accounting set up in 2021 or so.
Okay.
But since then, we did our bad debt write-off policy, brought that to you all 2 years ago, where we established the practice, and we have the thresholds where Harold makes the approvals versus we bring it to you all to approve. So certainly since 2022, then I'd say.
Okay, and I was just wondering if this is this an incentive? Have you found that rather than people just walking away, are they really making attempts to work with you? And because as you were mentioning, other communities don't really have this option or leeway.
Well, because typically, I know with other private entities, you can just write it off.
Yeah,
Claim
yeah,
it
and
on
we
taxes,
can't, yeah.
we'll call it a thing, but with the city, it's a little bit more different. And then it's also accountability on the property manager's end too, to make sure that we're constantly checking in with these voucher holders before it even gets to Kendra and Tracy. If we're doing a better job, which I'm striving that we do, we're hoping to communicate
Cool, yeah.
a lot better than we have in the past to be able to find this, because obviously.
I also think that when we find it early and the amount is not as insurmountable, the residents are more willing to work with us. But if it gets if it's very late and a big amount, then it is overwhelming, and maybe it's just a hands in the air situation.
Yeah.
So that is something that we're mostly checks and everything. We haven't run metrics on that, but I would expect that helps at least in that way by finding it earlier.
And that $10,000, that person knows how to play the game. They know
that's an anomaly.
that's not something that you see often, even every couple of years. Whoever did that, they've done this several times, but this time they just got caught. So it's not something that you consistently see.
How did that person get a voucher?
The same way everyone is able to. You get on the lottery, you get lucky, you get a placement, and then you do your income checks, and we look for everything that we can see. Later on, something might hit your bank account that we didn't see at that point in time.
Okay. All right, are there any more questions?
I'm just glad that you all got that system.
Yeah.
Seriously. I know it was a lot, but huge difference with the data. Yeah.
Thank you, Kendra.
Thanks.
So now we're at a resolution. Resolution
Oh,
LHA.
I should say, do you guys approve that the 4 individuals that have over $10,000 balance, you approve the write-off on that?
So we need to make a motion to, do I have a motion to approve the write-off for the 10,000, there are 4 write-offs.
There are 4, yeah.
Yeah.
No, just more than
46,000.
Harold can write up.
So there, it is the Housing Choice Voucher Repayment Plan, Spring Creek, Suites Apartments, and another one for the Suites Apartments, which are 2 units. So do I have a motion to write off, to give approval to write off this debt? $46,875.
Are we gonna be able to get it anyway?
Collections comes through.
I need a motion.
I'll move to approve this report for the 2024 bad debt write-off.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Hidalgo Ferry, seconded by Commissioner Chris. Is there any more discussion about the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor?
A little louder.
Aye.
Hey,
All those opposed? That passes 6-0, 5-0, with Commissioner Rodriguez absent. And now we are at the resolution LHA 2025-01. This is to establish a policy on approval of intergovernmental agreements. Turn it over to Molly.
Okay, so this is something we are proposing for the Housing Authority. This is a policy that matches the city's policy that council adopted a year or so ago.
Just after the charter amendment.
So we thought that this would be beneficial to bring to you all for consideration, to allow intergovernmental agreements that are under a certain threshold or meet several other considerations to be approved administratively by the interim executive director rather than coming to the board for approval. Those considerations are whether they're entailing any significant policy considerations, involving a direct monetary payment by the LHA, or involves a direct monetary payment to be made by the LHA. Sounds the same. I'm reading my memo, but anyways, in an amount that does not exceed $50,000. And then also what this would allow is amendments to intergovernmental agreements that meet also certain qualifications. They don't significantly alter the obligations of the LHA under the original IGA. The increase in the payment by LHA, if any, does not exceed 10% of the original payment required under the original IGA. Really, a reason for this is that we have had a lot of small-sized intergovernmental agreements coming to LHA in the last year or 2 years, many of which have come to the board, and there may be a $6,000 grant from Metropolitan State University, or the $6,000, they both happen to be $6,000 IGA for ARPA funds from the city. The amount of staff time to prepare those and bring them for consideration often outweighs the value of the IGA itself. So we thought that trying to align with city policy would be something that is beneficial for operations and get some of that money out the door the way it's supposed to quicker.
And to build on that, so there isn't currently an IGA policy for the LHA, so one of the kind of difficulties of coming from the city side where we've had 100 years of building the policies and building how things work, the charter, we have the code. LHA doesn't have that, right? We have the bylaws, we have little bits here and there, resolutions as we go. And I think one of the things I would like to do as we move forward is get stronger policies. Mm-hmm. So when someone says, who can sign this, Tim? I can say, this is an IGA. The LHA's IGA policy matches the city. And so if the LHA isn't spending money, there's not a real serious policy consideration. That could be a Herald sign. Right now, Herald's authorization of signatory authority probably includes a lot of the IGAs, but I think none of us felt comfortable sending an intergovernmental agreement to just Herald without them getting board approval. And so this sets a formal policy. And just to clarify a little bit on the amendments to IGAs, it's if the IGA originally had to get approved by the board, then the amendment can be approved administratively if it's just a little tiny, and that's how the city works as well. So if the first one had to go to the city council, the second, the amendment, if you just change the dates or something, we don't have to send that all the way back to city council. Same thing with this amendment policy.
Any questions about the policy? Can I get a motion to approve this?
I'll move resolution LHA 2025-01.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Hidalgo Ferry, seconded by Commissioner Yarbrough. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 5-0 with Commissioner Rodriguez absent. Moving right along, we are now at the budget modification request. LHA security cameras. I say yes right off the bat.
Yeah. So the security cameras project, we have made so much headway. It's been a very long and challenging project with lots of different contractors and procurement rules and that type of thing. But we have, at the end of 2024, we ordered the camera equipment and the software pieces of it, and got most of the licensing finished up with the budget that we had at the end of 2024. So those should be getting installed here hopefully soon. Sarah might be able to tell us later, and public safety, we could just skip to that part now. If you have any updates from them on timing?
No.
We're waiting
no.
for the cameras to get delivered
Right.
first. Okay.
And then the process will be pretty smooth. The contractor that is working for us also put the city cameras in, and it's pretty seamless, and we've got it down.
So the cost did rise as we really fine-tuned the entire scope up until the very end. And so right now we do have a $44,000 gap, which is partially just our licensing for the ongoing, for a 5-year period, and then the finish up of the install at the suites. We got that partially funded. But we really would like to be able to accomplish those all together. It would be the economy of scale would make a lot of sense. So on the city side, the federal ARPA funds. So remember those two buckets, federal ARPA and ARPA interest earnings. On the federal side, this is one of those projects slated to swoop up if federal funding gets released from some other program that has finished up what they're doing or couldn't use it. And so that money is available immediately, and we would just have to work through getting the IGA amendment done to get that added on. So this part of this budget request is to approve this budget modification so that we can just pull the trigger with the contractor since he's sitting and waiting and ready, and then we will have that funding source coming in within the next month. And then the second half of it is the install at the suites that is partially funded. We have about a $15,000 gap remaining on that, and due to the nature and the critical nature of getting those cameras up at the suites, what Harold suggested is asking for a budget modification to allow that to come out of LHA's general fund balance, which we do have a balance available, with the intent to seek out grant funds that we think are very promising in the first quarter of 2025. It's not fully available quite yet, however, but due to that critical nature, we wanted to get this one done as well and not have it sit and wait. So that is the request tonight for a budget amendment of $44,902.48 to allow us to finish up those contracts and get the cameras installed.
Can I ask where the $242,191 you said in grant funding? What kind of a grant funding that?
About $82,000 of that was CDBG funding from the suites, and then the rest of it was a combination of ARPA and ARPA interest earnings.
Okay, great.
So I have a question. And I know I'm saying just $15,877 compared to the repayment plan of $10,000. I'm sorry, I'll let it go. I'll let it go.
That's that guy.
Right?
Who was it? Who was that person?
So, do we have enough in the general fund if winter showed itself this last couple of days and pipes burst and, things like that happened at any of the other locations? I just want to make sure that, and I understand that probably some grants have already been, written and things like that to cover this. But in case of emergency, do we have enough in that fund to cover emergencies? That's my only question and concern.
A reserve fund?
So each property does have a reserve fund. Kendra can give maybe an idea of what a reserve fund, like a balance of that looks like on a sample property.
Well, it's different for every property.
Right.
Depending on when they start, what they set up. So like the suites set up 2 different reserves. We have 2 different reserves for the suites. Most of the other properties have one. And then they also have an operating reserve. So we do try to monitor on an annual basis, because you could have a pipe freeze and it doesn't actually really cost that much. We also have insurance. So in that type of scenario, if it's over $5,000, which is what our deductible is, we would put an insurance claim in for that. That type of situation. If you're just trying to replace that, we try to look if it's in the available budget for this year, and if not, then we go to the reserves. So a lot of the times it's a gamble every single month, and even all the way till the end of the year to see what's available and what we actually have to pull from reserves. I try not to pull from reserves because you don't put very much in that in a year. So if we don't need it and we have budget savings, we go there first.
So we have a minimum
Yes.
of 15,000 in each of the reserves for each property?
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So most of the reserves require, they start at about 300 per unit per year. And then every year is like a 3% increase. Some of them, which I think was a bad setup, they do the increase, they do it like every 5 years. So that doesn't really build it up as much as you need it to build it up if you're not doing it yearly, and that's like our smaller properties that have less units. But yeah, it grows, and the suites actually has 2 separate reserves that they set up, so it's even more replenished, which we need it there.
We certainly try and use that, save that for emergencies though, not like a new capital project like this.
And some of these properties also have cash flow surplus happening, so we'll even look at that, Yes, it may not be within the budget, but we do have a lot of cash flow surplus because we don't fully budget for the HCD vouchers because they're portable, and some other situations that happen. So we even might have cash flow surplus that will go out to the investor and say, hey, we want to use some of the surplus. And as long as we don't have a whole lot of like other developer fees and that type of situation, and we're in an operating deficit, it usually works pretty well.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because we're the ones voting, right? So have to ask the question, make sure. That's all. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Molly,
Yeah.
you said this will come out of the LHA general fund, the 15,000. And did you say that's all available right now? Or?
Yeah, the fund balance of our general fund, so not what we're relying on for operating costs.
And you have a fund balance for CIP projects.
So the fund balance is intended, well, Kendra can probably jump in here as well. It's not slated for CIP projects, but in cases such as this where we are quite confident that we can backfill it, we'd rather not use it for capital projects.
Okay.
It's supposed to be, in the future, what we'd like it to be is we can pull off from that for seed money for new developments to get something started. That's the idea with that. Right now, we're just trying to build the fund balance to be super stable.
Great, okay. Any more questions about that?
So do you need a motion? And move that we authorize making the budget amendment.
Second. It's been moved by Commissioner McCoy and seconded by Commissioner Faring to make the, what did you say, the amendment?
Budget modification request for the security cameras.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. So that passes 5-0. Commissioner Rodriguez is absent. We're now moving on to the LHA accessibility project.
I apologize, commissioners, we can remove this from this one. This was added on, but then the IGA amendment item will probably take care of this one because it's so small.
Oh, okay, great.
Yep.
So I'm going to remove the LHA accessibility project.
We can.
And I'm assuming, Molly, since Harold is not here, you're going to do the interim executive director report?
I am.
All right, let's development updates.
Yep. So the first update that I wanted to do, not development specifically, but we all welcomed Quincy and talking about our staffing at LHA. We are very close to being fully staffed up at all of the properties, and then elsewhere we have been for some time. So on the operations side, we are really looking forward to 2025 and having things, the theme is healthy and stable and fully staffed.
So everybody can take a breath.
Yes, a breath and just kind of
Or vacation.
settle and have, looking at the stuff that we have wanted to fix for a long time, but have been operating in go time mode for a while. So and I think staffing is so critical to that. So that's the big thing for 2025 for us.
Great.
Other ways on developments, we have also entered kind of a quiet settle period where we are closing out Village on Main, making sure everything is tied up with a ribbon and looking good there. And then Ascent is still obviously ongoing. We have construction underway, but we were able to get through that closing process, get everything kind of organized for construction, and then 2025 we'll be gearing up for on the operational side to get it leased up for what should be about January 2026 opening. So getting everything really ready to rock for that. We are looking to what is coming in 2025. So we've mentioned we are starting to look for a consultant that can help us check out the 202 exit program for the Hearthstone and Lodge to kind of refinance that into a different setup that gives us some more power over that budget. So we are getting started on that. We have not fully engaged on the former Royal Mobile Home Park parcel yet, but because the city is starting capital improvement design on the Kaufman Street extension, which would have the connection to the Greenway, it's I wouldn't say forcing our hand, it's an advantageous decision to get maybe a concept plan out there to make sure if they're going to be able to insert a curb cut for a driveway, let's see if we can place that so we can kill two birds instead of have to redo things later. So we might be coming up with some basic concept plans for that site soon, which is kind of exciting. We have not yet set a schedule for getting going on that, but we have developers calling about it. They're very interested, and so we'll see how that fits into our overall schedule. And then still considering that middle income project that's down in that transit station area, that developer is working on some internal workings to get the pro forma and looking at the options for financing, and more will be coming on that one.
Where is that one located?
It would be 121 Main, so next to Cheese Importers.
Yes, okay.
So we're seeing if they they're looking at their pro forma, seeing what their financing options look like, and they might have some.
That's the parking lot area there.
Is Jeff Bestall's company interested in that? Are they working?
They are.
with you?
They are part of they have they're working with the existing landowner and have some agreements in place, trying to get something going, which has been on the books for a long time.
A long time.
Yeah.
You know, I have a question on the Royal Mobile Home Park. With the work, the RSVP, and mitigation that has been done in that area, is that no longer a flooding concern? How
Not
are we
on
navigating
the
that?
ground. On the ground, it should be pretty good, but
Okay.
we do need to follow the city's map revision process
Yes.
for
Yeah,
flood
okay.
insurance and that type of thing. That will play a major role in the timing for that parcel, because the floodplain is an issue in high-tech projects,
Yeah, okay.
if that's the direction that we ended up going.
So it's still on that, it's still in the
It's-
floodplain?
It will be out of the mapped floodplain once everything is finalized with FEMA.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay, and then the hard to fill. So for the longest time, looking at these vacants, they were down for meth use or other issues. So being able to see, that they're working through the wait list, it's very exciting to see that, a lot of those listed. But I'm also looking at the 40% hard to fill. What does that mean?
So this is jumping into the occupancy report, which I'm happy to
Yeah.
transition to.
Yeah,
And then Lauren can help answer
okay.
that question.
Sorry, I was jumping.
No, that's fine.
Jumping in.
I just want to make sure we
Yeah.
can dive in. is there development, that could tie into development questions, so it's,
Right.
yeah, that makes sense. Would you like to dig into the occupancy report or have
Absolutely.
other questions?
Did you have
Okay,
other development stuff that you wanted to present?
that was really the update for now.
And, yeah, yes, we're ready for the development of land zone.
Yep, that's perfect, I know.
Well, she saw that we got rid of the accessibility projects.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Let's move on, yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up those units and we already, just for more information on the short term. All over in Spring Creek, so.
Oh, where it says 40% AMI
Yeah.
is hard to fill.
So
Under hard to fill.
what we have experienced in the past other properties are our 50% AMI 2-bedroom units have been difficult to fill because it's very hard for a single income to need a 2-bedroom and be able to pay the rent that covers a 2-bedroom cost.
Okay.
What we're seeing now is that we're actually getting to the end of our wait list on Fall River and Spring Creek and might be needing to open those up or generate some more interest in those. The units that are the 40%, they are 1-bedrooms at least, they're not 2-bedrooms. But they're just, the people that they're calling on the wait list either have moved on or they don't make enough money or they don't make 2 times the rent. And sometimes that can prevent people from moving in. For us, it's important to make sure that someone can financially pay the rent because you don't want to put someone in a unit where it's a stretch and they're rent
Yeah.
burdened. That's like the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yes, yeah.
So finding tenants, potential tenants who meet the financial requirements and have the 2 times the rent have been hard for those couple 40% units, for those 2 properties specifically. We don't have a centralized wait list. Each property has its own, so that's why we might have people on a wait list for a different property where we're able to fill those units. They're not all on the same wait lists. Some people will apply to all of them if they qualify with a 62 and up. And then obviously Spring Creek is 55 and up, so some will apply to all of them. Some will only apply to the ones where they want to live in that area. So, but we're working with the property management team there to reach out to some more people, and we might be trying to generate some more interest in that wait list and get that refreshed and get some new applicants there. For the rest of the properties, and I will happily hand this over in the future to Quincy since this is more of his alley and he'll be able to do more with it. I will probably revamp this report. Because the one thing that I don't like about it is you guys might see every month the same number of vacancies, but that doesn't mean it's the same units all the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because people are coming and going, passing, moving in with family, moving to assisted living, whatever the situation is. So it doesn't really give you a good idea of that flow. Aspen Meadows neighborhood, I am happy to report that B2, the unit that has been down for meth for years, is officially rentable, and we are working on filling that unit.
It was a full rebuild.
Great.
Yes, like it went down to the studs, and now it's completely redone. That was a 2-bedroom. We also had that move out last year that was, the person had lived there for like 15 years, so it had a lot of wear and tear. We had to do a lot of work. That one was C5. That one is up and ready, and we're looking for an applicant for that. That's a 4-bedroom PDD. So that one, I'm excited that one will be getting rented. Aspen Meadows Senior, we have 3 ready to rent and working through the wait list. One of them was a unit that needed full floor replacement. That got done in 2024 and it's ready to rent. We had 2 people recently move out. Fall River and Spring Creek, those have had vacancies that had been sitting because of the rush to get other down units with our shoestring team of maintenance focusing on those down units. So now those are getting turned pretty quickly. One at Fall River is a PBV, so they're pulling from their PBV list while we pull the tax credit list as well. And then Spring Creek has the 6 vacancies. 2 pending applications, 1 pending make ready, and 3 ready to rent. Hearthstone and Lodge both have 1 vacancy, and those are pending make ready. They need a little bit of extra love, because those are just some of the older properties that we have. Those are the 202 ones. Suites, we have 3 vacants, so our vacancies have gone down significantly there. 2 are MHP, 1 is LHA. The 2 MHP units have applications pending and move-in scheduled, and then the LHA one is a transfer. So we'll have another unit, another LHA unit available after that person transfers. Village on Main, we have 2 project-based voucher vacant units, working through the wait list and qualifications to fill those, and then they'll be fully leased up at VOM. Getting the PBVs set in December was a bit of a push so that we could get that subsidy payment to help with the rehab and what's the word I want to use? Stabilization. So that's almost done. And then Briarwood, we have 2 vacants that are ready to rent and working through the wait list. The down units that we have are 7228 at the Suites, which was a meth unit. We have a contractor who we're working with to finalize the measurements and release them to do the work and rebuild that unit out. It's a small studio. And then Fall River, we had a meth unit there, which was only a cleaning. Thankfully, it was not a tear down. And so that one has been cleaned and completed. We're waiting for the report for recycle, and then that one will be active as of 12/31. So both of those units should be up and running and rented out within the next 2 months. With 409 much sooner than 7228. But we're working on our vacancies, and we have plans to improve those numbers for the occupancy going into 2025.
So you mentioned that the 2 bedrooms were more difficult to rent because of not having 2 wage earners. As we go into Ascent, which is based upon families, do you expect that they would be difficult to rent? That makes me nervous.
I don't think so, because it's family housing, it's not senior. And I think the issue we're seeing with senior housing is just the fixed income and the lack of cost of living increases versus inflation, and the cost of living, the real actual cost of living going up. The cost of living increases with Social Security is not keeping up with inflation. But the AMIs continue to rise. So I don't consider some of the affordable LIHTC units actually affordable. Not for a fixed income, they're not. So, but we did rent those 2-bedroom 50% units. We did finally find tenants for them, but it just takes a little while. We have to call a lot of people down the wait list.
Yeah, and Ascent is a new build too. New builds are never hard to fill. Yeah.
Quincy, did you find the same data really where you worked before, that for older?
Yeah, if it's a senior property, yeah, just like Lauren said, the income is fixed, so you can't do anything with that. And then on top of it, yes, seniors typically tend to have more assets that they could liquefy, but once you start liquefying those assets, you're over income, and then you can't qualify there at all. So it's a hard median to find when it comes to filling senior properties. So yeah.
When it comes to senior properties, does it have to be family members that live with them, or are they allowed to share, share a 2-bedroom?
It depends on the programming.
Right.
Depends on the programming. Some programs, they only allow you to be there by yourself, or if your spouse qualifies with you. Not even a family member. It just depends. It could really be your husband or your wife, kids, not really. So it really, yeah, it just depends on your situation or what type of program.
So if 2 people wanted to live together in a straight LIHTC, they would have to qualify as a household. So both incomes would count, which might put them over income.
So sometimes our 2-bedroom units, at one point we had one where there was a son living with them but disabled. And then in some instances, they have live-in caretakers that can take that 2nd bedroom. And that doesn't qualify, count towards your income. But if you can show all the backup documentation that that's what the purpose is, then that is the way that happens as well.
Okay.
So I have a legal question. Quincy mentioned that when they liquefy their assets and they're over the income to being able to live in the units or qualify. Is there any plan to be able to transfer those assets to an LHA property. So that they don't become,
Are you talking about maybe, so one concept that you might be thinking of is like special needs trust, that you can put those assets into a trust that still allows you to have the income qualifications.
I know that there, well,
Certainly not under the, like, you couldn't transfer them to the LHA or LHDC as trustee for those. We wouldn't do, we have no program for that, and I can't think of the mechanism off the top of my head.
okay, I was just thinking of
I don't think you would wanna do that.
it. Well,
You don't want family members coming down the line saying, you know, my mama, my grandmother was this and that, and you took their assets and.
No, without much further research, I wouldn't recommend any route like that. But there might be, and with the caveat that I don't do estate planning, but I think there are some sort of trust mechanisms, particularly for around senior health care that people use as a vehicle to still have their assets, but put them into a trust.
And there's rules guiding that, like especially under Hotman now, that if you have a trust that you are in full control over, and you can liquidate the funds anytime, then that counts against you more so than if you have a trust set up that other people can access and give you money, then it would just be the money that you actually receive as income. And just to clarify, once you're in a tax credit property, if there's no other subsidy that has other rules, and you go over your income, and you go over the AMI limit, we don't ask them to leave.
oh, you don't?
No, in a straight tax credit property. So as long as you qualify when you moved in,
Okay.
and you continue to recertify every year, up to 140% AMI. At that point, other rules kick in, next available unit.
Yeah,
that
next
kind of
available
thing.
unit will kick in, but that still doesn't ask them to leave. It just,
Right.
That just changes the requirements. And we are all 100% affordable,
Yeah,
so next
so we don't
available
have
unit
that.
doesn't actually have to practice. So
And so this is
But
not
that's-
something we hit with senior population.
Right, their income does not go up that
Doesn't go
much.
that much,
the,
yeah.
one of the particular difficulties that the LHA properties has is sometimes layering of different restrictions. So we talk about the LIHTC program and the LIHTC requirements. Those are the ones that are most well known and pervasive. But sometimes you layer on cities IH restrictions, or you layer on
Home restrictions.
home restrictions. Different subsidies will carry their own restrictions with them, or just vouchers. You might lose your voucher because you're going over income, but you might not get kicked out of your LIHTC unit. But sometimes that's the same thing.
You just go up, the rent would just raise to market.
You just go
You'd
down.
be paying 2,000 instead of 400, so.
And that's when you go into debt collection because you
Because you
Can't afford it.
Probably more of a problem you see on like the general population affordable housing rather than
Or mixed income.
housing.
Okay. We don't need any, this is just information, right?
This
We
is
don't
just
need-
information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so we had the development updates and update on where occupancy report, we had that.
That. Property updates, things are going relatively smooth on all the properties. The one update I would say is most important for you guys to be aware of is that in 2025, we have switched to a quarterly coffee and conversations schedule. So we are not meeting monthly anymore. What we found over the last year is that there was not much to talk about. And we would try to schedule, organizations to come in and talk, and I think a lot of tenants were like, we know, we've seen this. So we were spending money every month to feed and, caffeinate the residents, which is always nice to get together, but we didn't have anything, we didn't often have meaningful topics to talk about.
Okay.
So we switched to the quarterly with the plan that they will be more robust, more informative. If there's anything that we need to communicate to tenants in the interim, we can do so through notices and posting. We're also going to start revamping and pushing our newsletter that we send out through Scott with the comms team. So we'll be focusing more on that to get people notified of what's happening around the properties.
I think the monthly ones absolutely were beneficial and served a
Right.
purpose at a period of time
Yes.
where there was a lot of
Yep.
change and there was a lot of just questions from residents, and I think things have really stabilized on that side since in the last year.
Actually, we're gonna keep the monthly at the suites.
At the suites, we'll keep monthly, just because of the unit turnover and the population and just the constant, it's good for everyone to check in. And we're gonna do the same thing at Zinnia, but for the other properties, the non-PSH, we're just gonna do quarterly.
City is pretty new also, so getting some kind of consistency there would be a great idea.
Yep.
But I can see where the suites, hopefully you cut down on the gossip.
It'll never end.
Human beings.
But in that case, sometimes depending on the gossip, but getting everybody in the room to talk to each other is still community building, so.
Sounds like Thanksgiving families. Okay, we are now at public health and safety updates.
All right, well, the calls for service might seem a little high, but not really. It's just because we skipped December. The suites, we had 35 calls, mostly civil and welfare checks. That doesn't include court calls at all, so people actually calling that live there or neighbors calling. The neighborhood, Aspen neighborhood, we only had 4 calls. Senior, Aspen apartment community only had 3. Lodge had 1, Hearthstone had 0, Village on Main had 5. Several of those were 911 hang-ups, and I think it was kind of interesting, 4 calls. So, Briarwood had 0, Fall River had 4, Spring Creek had 5, and Zinnia had, I'm not counting some of the other calls because it's assists and stuff like that, I don't count, but they had 23. So, and their calls were all over the map, like an assault, a disturbance. There wasn't a rhyme or reason with any of them, so. As far as anything else, staff starting, after we started talking about our meth detectors and implementation, we're going to start working on an SOP for when we put these in, what our protocol is going to be. So we're going to start on that. And then I'm going to start planning to bring to staff the install for the meth detectors at Ascent. And what that looks like, because it's going to be a pretty big endeavor. And it's about timing. So
We've budgeted to put one in every unit and in several common spaces. So that'll be the first big one.
And that's all I have. Is there any questions for me?
I'm curious about, I know that there was, before you had security, good security, especially at the suites, that you had a lot of people hanging around trying to sell drugs, etc. Has that slowed down a bit, or?
For the most part, yes. We do, before it got cold, so maybe a couple of weeks ago, we had unhoused camp behind the storage units that folks were, coming around the ditch, but as of now, security has definitely helped with that, and a lot of the calls that have come in, especially to Zinnia, are from security.
Oh, that's good.
So,
Yeah.
They're very involved.
That,
Okay. I got the smile. All right, is there anything else that you want to inform us about? No. Okay.
Happy New Year.
That's your comments. I almost say that's your comments.
I move we adjourn if we're.
It's been moved by Commissioner McCoy, seconded by Commissioner Yarbrough, that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That passes 5-0 with Commissioner Rodriguez absent. Thank you very much.